Welcome to Newport Living and Lifestyles. Joining us today is Deborah Goodrich Royce, the owner and of this beautiful establishment, a Relais and Chateau, Ocean House, Rhode Island. She is a little bit of history. I'm going to need my notes. An actress, philanthropist, entrepreneur, I like to say revitalist, and best-selling author of 2 books, and now a third is on its way, January 2023. So that is a very exciting book, but first I wanted to go through your first 2 books very quickly, and then we can talk about the new release.
Okay, so Finding Mrs. Ford came out in 2019. I write psychological thrillers. I like to call them identity thrillers. The idea is you're examining bits of identity and really what it is that people are concealing. There are things that we reveal, things that we conceal. So in Finding Mrs. Ford, it begins right here in beautiful Watch Hill, Rhode Island in 2014 when the FBI shows up at the house of a woman to ask her about an Iraqi Chaldean man. The Chaldeans are Catholics from the north of Iraq, and in that moment in 2014, it's right when ISIS is rampaging all over Iraq and killing a lot of people, including Chaldeans, and our heroine, Susan Ford, says she does not know this man. And of course she's lying. And you go back to Detroit in 1979 when she's much younger. She's a college co-ed, and she meets a young woman, a peer, who drags her into this kind of sketchy disco to work that's heavily populated by Iraqi Chaldean men. So that's the setup of that book. What happened in the summer of 1979? Why is this man looking for her in 2014? And why is she lying? Why not just say what happened? So you spend the book peeling that onion. Ruby Falls, which came out last year, is more of a gothic thriller. It plays with gothic tropes, the idea of more of a damsel in distress who comes under the sway of an older, more powerful man who may or may not have her best interests at heart. And it begins with a little girl named Ruby, abandoned in a cave called Ruby Falls in Chattanooga, Tennessee, by her father in the dark. So it's a traumatic incident in her life. She grows up to be a soap opera actress, is fired from her show for one reason or another, you don't know why, takes off for Europe, meets a tall, dark, handsome stranger, and marries him, and trouble begins. So that's the first 2 books. Do you want me to go on to the third?
You know what? Yes, that's fine, because we can always circle back to some details that I did want to point out. Now, the third book, Reef Road, is an interesting tale of your mother's childhood experience. Her 12-year-old best friend was murdered, and her mother, your grandmother, or was it her grandmother? Her mother, your grandmother, didn't allow her to sleep over that night at her 12-year-old best friend's home, thus saving her life.
Maybe saving her life. Maybe had she been there, the crime wouldn't have happened. They were 12 years old, 1948. It was Christmas, December the 10th. They had gone to their little practice for the Christmas pageant at their local church in Pittsburgh. They lived in, a real working class neighborhood of Pittsburgh, row houses. And there's a lot of dispute about what happened that night, how someone came in the door. The real girl, her parents went bowling, and they came home at 11:30 at night to find her stabbed multiple times next to the telephone table in the dining room. And so what happened and how did it happen? And it's remained unsolved, and it's really haunted my mother. And what I really wanted to get at in that book, and I've fictionalized it, I don't take the actual murder. I've created a character of a writer who's obsessed with the murder of her mother's best friend. And I think there's a syndrome, if you think about Dominic Dunn, who was fixated on celebrity murder trials after his daughter, the actress Dominique Dunn, was murdered. If you think about Michelle McNamara, she wrote I'll Be Gone in the Dark, and that was the book which then became an HBO series which helped find the Golden State Killer, who was a serial killer in California. So I think there's a syndrome of people who come in close proximity to violence with someone they know and love, that it alters them. It stays with them. It is one of those experiences that doesn't just affect the victim. It has a ripple effect.
Yeah, I always say it bends their DNA. It sticks with you.
Exactly right. And I actually think it's scientifically true. There was a study done in Canada, I believe. A psychiatrist was the first person to identify that children of Holocaust victims in the 1960s had a whole range of problems that this psychiatrist was not seeing in the rest of the population. And I think trauma of that level, it does bend the DNA. It gets into you at a cellular level.
It does. Now, you chose to write about this. There are a lot of other movies, films, documentaries, and books written about this scenario. How did it affect you writing it, delving down deep into it? Did you find what you were looking for?
So I did find what I was looking for, and that's an excellent question. I was in Florida with the pandemic lockdown. So the middle of March 2020, we all know where we were. We weren't going anywhere. I am in this house in Florida. We have a house down there. And I started the research process. I had intended to write another book, but I started researching this real murder. I decided I didn't want to write about the real murder. In the real case, they do believe it was the brother. I really don't want to tangle with people's personal lives. That's not what I'm in the business of doing, and I don't want to get so factually bound about the real crime. I wanted to explore this syndrome, and I weave it with a more noir aspect thriller of a younger woman whose husband and children, very, very handsome fellow from Argentina, he disappears, last seen on a plane at Miami International in his face mask, getting on a plane with the children for Buenos Aires. And she can't follow. She's an American citizen. So the pandemic for me gave a constraint. All of a sudden you've got people in a box. It's almost like a wartime setting. And I found it very effective for the story of this writer who's obsessed with this murder and this young woman whose family's falling apart. And bit by bit, thinking of secrets, you start to unravel what one woman has to do with the other woman. And it's really the story of these two women.
Well, that's a twist. All of your books have a very interesting twist.
Yes.
Unforeseen. You cannot figure out what is going to happen.
Right. So, and they say there's a difference between a reveal and a twist. Many thrillers have a reveal where you find out who did it. My thrillers, at least through the third book, they all have a twist where you think one thing might be happening and you find out something very different is going on. And I had an editor for Ruby Falls advise me to rewatch The Sixth Sense. If you remember that movie, it has a twist. And there's
shocking twist.
Yes. But she said there's a moment when that twist is revealed, and what they do cinematically is they go back and they give you all the little breadcrumb trail. So you then see, oh, I could have figured out, even if I didn't. She said nobody wants Agatha Christie anymore. And what happens in Agatha Christie, it's sort of a locked room murder mystery, and all of a sudden the detective comes in and says, it was the French parlor maid you saw on page 3. And it can be a little, a bit of a letdown, because you really couldn't have ever solved that. She said, with Ruby Falls, no one will solve it, but when they get to that moment, you want them to be able to think they could have, as they go back and piece it together again.
And it causes for another read. And another read.
That's right.
And another read.
That's right. So look at it again. And I'm very intrigued with the idea that things aren't always what they seem. People aren't always what they seem. I think we all have secrets. Most of our secrets are very benign. And then occasionally you meet somebody in life and you just can't believe it when it comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And each of those experiences maybe make us who we are today. stronger, wiser, more caring, possibly more empathetic.
I think so. And being, really getting my writing career going older, I'd been an actress and I'd been a story editor. I think I have more perspective into, the vagaries of the human character, having just lived a little bit longer and seen a little bit more.
I agree with you. You do have a breadth of different things that you've done, all related, I think, back to acting and the writing, being an author. I was going to ask you, as a child, growing up, were you writing poetry and exploring stories? And I know that you were an avid reader, possibly an introvert or an extrovert.
I think I'm really an introvert who can function as an extrovert. So I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
But
But
I
you
think,
can take the
well, they
time and
ask you, the question they ask you, I think, is do you rejuvenate or recharge your battery alone? Or do you recharge your battery with people? I recharge my battery alone.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that lends to being a good reader as a child, which you were. You guys went to the library. I don't know if your parents actually encouraged you to be an avid reader, or did they read a lot?
Well, I think we were a little bit more feral then. I think we were a little bit more on our own.
Yeah.
I don't think we were as shaped by our parents as children are now,
yes.
shaped by their parents. So one of the things I would do, being an only child, I was alone a lot, and we had, I grew up in suburban Detroit. We had a finished basement, which was a big thing. It meant it had that weird kind of cardboardy paneling and a floor, and it had a fireplace and bookshelves. So I would go downstairs and read this set of encyclopedia that had belonged in my father's family from the 1940s. So I was getting really old information, but it was very interesting. So I think there was a creative benefit to not being as micromanaged, because I think we, and I speak really collectively, but certainly for myself, we were much more on our own. So a lot of imaginative play, a lot of reading, writing, making things up, making stories. Yeah, all of it.
Do you have any poems or short stories that you still reflect back on and think, I really like that one?
Oh, that I've written? That's a great
As a child.
question. My mother sent me one recently that was in my school circular, the bulletin, and I think it was about, animals on the farm or something. It wasn't very thrilling.
Did you have animals on the farm? Were you
No, we
caretakers?
lived in a suburban house, so we had dogs. We always had dogs. Briefly had a cat. Cats and dogs.
Yeah.
Sometimes chicks, back then people would routinely give you live chicks at Easter, and then you had to kind of figure out, I don't know what was ever done with them. But
you just remember receiving them.
They were briefly in the household, those chicks. Yeah.
So how did growing up as a child in Detroit, Michigan, allow you to get where you are today? I know that you went to school for minor in dance and some acting. Do you think something influenced you there? Were you like, I got to get out of this town and I'm bigger than this? Or was it something
That
different?
is it. You have hit the nail on the head. I had this burning desire to go somewhere. I wanted to go to Paris. I wanted to go see something. And I had never been to Europe until I was in college. And I went to a college where you had an academic semester abroad in your junior year. And that was a huge step for me, and it's a lot of the reason I chose that school. So so how to put this? I look at my own children and their peers.
You have two daughters.
I have 2 daughters and 4 stepchildren, so we have a lot of kids.
You need a hug.
Yeah, they grew up, they're all so sophisticated at a very young age. We just took 19 family members to France. These kids have seen and done so much, and they're smart and talented and wonderful human beings, but I don't know if they have that kind of crazy-making desire to get out of where they are.
I don't think so, because they're going places.
they are.
Young children, the world is smaller with the internet. You can go anywhere you want.
You can.
My daughter calls me FaceTimes from Germany every other day.
Yeah.
So it is nice. So all of your books are award-winning through Forbes and is it Zibby Awards?
Zibby Owens, yeah,
Zibby,
she's
okay.
incredible. And she'll be here on, you should come back, August 13th.
Oh.
I'm interviewing her about her new book. Yeah, so got that.
So are you going to start in awards?
I don't think so. I don't think so. No, I'm not stepping into that space. But she's a delight.
Okay, well, we'll make sure to capture that September.
August 31st.
Oh,
August 31st.
See, I flipped that. I'm
Yeah.
dyslexic for sure. So Goodrich, is that of the Goodrich Corporation?
It is not. And so, maiden name Goodrich, married name Royce, neither one related, but hilariously, both automotive, could be linked. So my heroine in Finding Mrs. Ford is Susan Bentley Ford, which is just a little wink at my own name.
Yeah. And another character, is it Silver?
Well, Silver is the character I played on All My Children.
Yeah,
Silver Kane.
That's right. Is there a character in the book, though, that you...
So when I was on All My Children, I played the sister of Susan Lucci,
Right.
who played Erica Kane, one of the biggest stars in soap opera history. So in Ruby Falls, Eleanor used to be on a soap opera called The Finger of Fate and played the sister of an actress called Sylvia Long.
That's what it was. Yeah.
So we like to play. People always say, is it autobiographical? None of it is, but you take little bits of your life and little stories and vignettes.
Well, I have noticed that there's a lot of consistencies in your books with realities from your actual life.
Absolutely.
In every book. I wrote a few down. That one was being an actress. One being, was she from Michigan?
Yeah, in both of them. And
Okay.
both of the heroines in the first two books are from Michigan, not in the third book.
Okay. So nothing, yeah, well, that's a different style of
Different
book.
story.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was some other references too that I don't have top of mind, but if you know them, we'll Watch Hill.
Watch Hill. So in Ruby Falls, most of the book plays out in Los Angeles. And Ruby Falls is sort of inspired by Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca. It is not a complete rewrite of Rebecca, but in Rebecca, a lot of it plays out at this kind of dreamy, mystical house on the Cornish coast called Manderley.
Okay.
I set most of it in Los Angeles, and I find that LA, the Hollywood Hills, can have that kind of dreamlike quality for most of us. We've all watched American movies, we've all seen the Hollywood Hills, and I wanted to set it in a place that felt a little bit mythic.
Yeah, it is. It's very beautiful. And one thing I like about your writing, and I know a lot of your followers say this, is it's so visual.
Right.
You see it playing out just like a movie. And I know that's a very popular theme, but it's so true. And I think that's why it's so enjoyable, because it's cinematic.
It is important to me. For that reason, I write real places. I go to the places. I make sure I've walked a scene and that it's really realistic, because I think there's a thrill of recognition when we read, let's say, the Hollywood Hills. And I'm talking about Beechwood Canyon, and you might think, I've been there. Or she's making a movie on the Paramount lot, and you've seen those Paramount gates. And I like those thrills of recognition. I think people enjoy that. Even it's a fictitious story in a real place. Lots of people write made-up places, which is great too, but I kind of prefer doing this.
You can recognize the story a little
Right.
better, I believe. Look up Deborah Goodrich Royce. Read her books. They will not disappoint. And if you have any other questions, follow up. Feel free to make those comments, and we look forward to seeing you on Newport Living and Lifestyles.